Hey everyone. Okay, so take a look at the Notepad document that's in the top right corner of this screen, and you'll see that there are 3 videos listed. That's how many videos I'm going to create for you to get up to speed on everything that we need you to learn about for Wednesday, but really also for the midterm. For what it's worth, after this week, what you'll need to know for the midterm will have peaked, meaning you'll keep learning new things, but I would say that this is the most challenging moment for you before we start really working on midterm projects. So power through all of this as much as you can, work on it outside of class, watch these videos more than once if they help, and certainly listen carefully and take notes in class on Wednesday. Okay, so let's start out with a brush up on the print line method. And you all know this method really well, I hope, at this point. Basically, print line does nothing more than print information inside the parentheses, whether it is quote-unquote hard-coded into that method or it is taken from a variable directly into the console area down here. This black area here is the console. And so the information that print line prints only goes here, not to your display window. Inside the setup, which only runs once when you first run a sketch, I'm going to type in print line. This is the basic empty method call, print ln, print line, and it will print something on a single line to the console. And then I can put all kinds of stuff in there. I can put text. I'll go ahead and run that. And hello is written to the console. I can put in a number. And I can put in a variable. Or, and we haven't learned about the string type, but strings let you save textual data to a variable. It's just another data type. All of these things can be printed to the console by print line. And I wanted to give you a brush up on that because as we look at how arrays work, initially for these videos, the values that we're going to access and print from the array that you create while following through this video will only print to the console because I just want to keep things simple. We could print all kinds of stuff to the display window, images, text, etc., but it just adds a little extra coding, and at this point I want to make sure the basic concepts of arrays and then for loops are clear to you. All right, so that was the brush up on print line, and I already wrote a couple things out related to variables, but let's do a quick brush up on that specifically. And I'd like to start out by talking about the difference between global and local variables. Global variables are variables that can be used in any part of your sketch. That is not a given when you're working in an object-oriented or object-based language like this. In object-oriented languages, which processing has sandboxed to some degree to make programming a lot easier for you, nonetheless has the characteristics of. In an object-oriented language, when you declare a variable inside a specific function like setup or draw, it can't be used outside of that function. It is kind of local and limited to use inside those opening and closing curly braces. So if you want to have a variable that can be used by any function anywhere within a sketch, you have to declare it quote-unquote globally, and you do that by declaring it, in our case, above the setup, outside of any specific function. So now let's really look at what variables are as Newport was breaking them down. And this is just going to be 30 seconds or a minute's worth. because she gave you all that information this morning. But I'm going to declare a couple of variables globally and then print them to the console. So I'm going to go ahead and type in int number equals 20. And basically all this is going to do is print the value of the variable number. Number is a container. I mean, literally think of it like a cup or a box or something that contains information. And the really big important thing here is that you have to data type your container. So you have to tell processing what kind of data is going to go into the variable that I've called number. If I try to put a string of data in there, if I try to put a float value, if I try to put a Boolean true or false, or any of the other data types that exist, you're going to get an error. This adds a certain level of tedium to programming, but it also adds a level of control and safety to code that is getting unmanageable or data that's getting mixed up with other data. So it's worth really focusing and understanding how to do this. Okay, so moving on from just basic variables, which are containers that can contain one piece of information typed to a specific kind of information. Now we're looking at arrays, and as I said toward the end of today's class, arrays are they're a data structure that allows you to organize or bundle together two or more pieces of information that are of the same data type under a specific and similar name. Okay, so that's a bit generic in description. Let's just go through a little bit more clearly. Think literally of like a chest of drawers. Okay, if you look at a chest of drawers, imagine giving it a name like numbers. Each drawer can have different information in it. So you might have 3 drawers, and the first drawer would have a number 22 inside of it. A second drawer would have a number 46 inside of it, and a third drawer would have a number 72 inside of it. When you create an array, you define how many drawers that chest is going to have, and then you assign values to each of those drawers. And then you can use that array in a variety of ways. So let's take a look at the code that I have up here. You'll notice that I've replaced number, which was the variable up just a couple minutes ago, with a new variable called numbers. And you'll notice that the data type is still int, it's still integer, but now there's an opening and closing square brackets right after the t. Those brackets let processing know that you're not just creating a variable that's data typed for integers, but that it is an array. And now let's take a look down at the void. Let's look at the setup. And you'll notice this line here. This is where I tell processing how many drawers I want in my chest. Okay, so how many rows are going to be in my array. And I'm saying that there are going to be 3. And then what I've done on lines 8 through 10 here is assign values to each of those rows or drawers in that chest. So computers count from 0, so there are going to be 3 rows, but the rows are numbered 0, 1, and 2. And those numbers to the right of the equal sign, those are the numbers that I'm assigning to each one of those rows in the array. So if you think of this like a chest of drawers, I mean, literally visualize these 3, 0, 1, and 2 inside square brackets as the 3 drawers inside of a chest. These are the numbers that you're putting into the top drawer, the middle drawer, and the bottom drawer. So I realize that arrays right now just might sound like another thing to learn, but trust me, in a couple of weeks when you start working with the touch sensor and its 12 inputs, those 12 inputs are the values from those 12 inputs are going to be saved easily and most economically in an array. And so for the midterm and really for the rest of this semester, once we start working with the touch sensor, which is coming around the corner pretty soon, anytime you want to work with the data from an original touch interface that you create, anytime you want to access data associated with one or more of those touch inputs, you're going to be accessing one of 12 rows inside an array that is saving all the values from the touch sensor. And those rows will be numbered 0 through 11 because a computer starts counting from 0, and 11 would be the 12th number. Let's take a look at 12 here. Print line. We know what print line does. Inside the parentheses, I have numbers, and inside opening and closing square brackets, 0. That means that I am accessing the top drawer or top row or row number 0 inside the array named numbers. And we can see what the value for that row is. It's 22. And I'd already run this once before, so the answer is still sitting here in the console, but I'm going to go ahead and run it fresh. And you can see 22. I'm going to switch this out for 1, which is the middle or second row, and I should get a 46. Switch that out for row number 2, which is the third row, and get a number 72. You can have thousands of rows in an array. I mean, just to start thinking about its value, you know, if we're just working with a dozen values, or we're just working with even like 3 in this context, well, then why not just create 3 variables or even create 12? It might not be the most efficient coding, but it's still manageable. But what happens when you start working with hundreds or thousands of data points, which you'd be surprised to realize is going to happen, maybe even in this class. Data within a computational context very quickly grows into the hundreds, thousands, tens thousands, even millions of data points. And the only way to store and organize and access that kind of data is with structures like an array. Okay, I've wiped the sketch clean. I want to show you how to work with names instead of numbers. Okay, so I had mentioned toward the end of class today, well, you know, we can make an array of all of you, the students in the class. So let's go ahead and do something like that. And I'll do that with a string array. So we know this is an array, not just a simple variable, because of the opening and closing brackets at the end of the data type. And now we need to go ahead and initialize. We need to create students and declare how many slots or rows or drawers we're going to have. Okay, so students equals new string. Let's make this one 5. And then I like to indent when I'm assigning values to each of the rows, if I do it this way, just so I can kind of, it's just a little bit more readable. So what I want to do is type in students 0 equals students, and do that for the rest of the rows that I've created. Now remember, we've said that we want, or I've said I want 5 rows in this particular array. Since it counts from 0, that's why we end at 4. Now I can put some names in there. So on the left here, I brought up the titles for all of your Tech 1 assignments, since they've got your names in there. Akshara, Ali, Alicia, Carl, and Charlie. Now, what if I want to print to the console, because that's all we're doing right now. I mean, we could obviously print this all to the screen and then add some really nice fonts and different sizes and, you know, do something really cool with it. But just for now, I want to focus on this basic structure and basic understanding of the array. So if I want to print the value of student row 2 to the console, then I would type in the name of the array and the row number that I want to access. And we can see Alicia gets printed to the console. Or 4 gets printed to the console. There's a lot more to be said about arrays. But if you come into class on Wednesday having created 1 or 2 arrays on your own, one data typed as an integer, one data typed as a string, and successfully printed 1 or more values from each of those arrays to the console, you're going to be in a really good place to have to know everything that we're going to be going over.